Captain Alex Carter had been a soldier for as long as he could remember, trained for every situation, prepared for every enemy. But nothing could have prepared him for the disaster he found himself in now. His mission had gone horribly wrong, and his transport ship, once a symbol of human technology and power, was now nothing more than a twisted wreck on an unknown alien planet. The crash was violent, shaking the ground beneath him and throwing him against the control panel. His body ached and blood trickled down his forehead, but his training kicked in. He quickly scanned the area. His ship was broken beyond repair, and the planet outside looked strange, eerie, and hostile. Struggling to move, Alex grabbed his rifle and made his way out of the wreckage, his boots crunching on the dry, cracked soil. The planet seemed desolate, a barren wasteland stretching for miles. In the distance, dark clouds swirled above jagged mountains, hiding whatever dangers lurked in the sky. Alex's mission had been to retrieve sensitive information from a remote outpost, but now his only goal was survival. His cloaking device was his only hope to avoid detection by alien forces patrolling the area. As he moved deeper into the alien landscape, the weight of isolation began to sink in. He was alone. No backup, no support, no way to contact Earth. The alien civilization on this planet was highly advanced, and they were known for their ruthless efficiency. The last thing Alex needed was to be discovered by them. The planet felt wrong. Too quiet, too still. Alex kept his rifle close, every sense on high alert. Then, as he rounded a rocky outcrop, he heard it. A sound, soft at first, like a faint cry, echoing through the canyon. It was so far away that he almost thought it was his mind playing tricks on him. But no, it came again, more distinct this time. It was the sound of someone in pain, someone who needed help. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what kind of life forms lived on this planet, but he couldn't just ignore the cry. Despite the dangers, he decided to investigate. His heart pounded as he made his way toward the source of the sound, using every bit of stealth he had learned in his years of service. The cave entrance was hidden beneath an overhang, barely noticeable against the jagged rocks. He crept inside, his cloaking device humming softly, keeping him hidden from any prying eyes. The cave was dark, damp, and the air smelled stale. As he ventured deeper, the sound grew louder. It wasn't just a cry. It was a plea for help. Someone was in trouble, and Alex knew he couldn't turn back now. Around a corner, he found her. A woman. No, not human, but she was unmistakably intelligent. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, her eyes wide and filled with fear, and her long silvery hair was tangled and matted. She was crouched against the wall, her hands clutching the small figure in her arms. The child, human-sized but with similar alien features, was pale, sickly, and barely breathing. Alex froze, unsure of what to do. His training told him to assess, to be cautious, but this was not the time for that. He could see the desperation in the woman's eyes. She wasn't a threat. She was a mother, terrified for her child. "Please," she gasped, her voice weak but pleading. "Help us. You're human, aren't you? You can save us." Alex's mind raced. How could she know he was human? He had his cloaking device on, and he wasn't making a sound. He stepped forward cautiously, trying to make sense of the situation. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low, tense. The woman looked up at him, her eyes brimming with fear, but also something else. Hope. "I'm Tara," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was cast out by my people. They've hunted me, abandoned me. But I'm not alone. I can't let my daughter die." Alex's grip tightened around his rifle, but he didn't raise it. There was something in her voice, something in her face that made him pause. She was scared, yes, but she wasn't a threat. "Your daughter," Alex murmured. "What happened to her?" Tara's eyes filled with sorrow. "She's sick, poisoned by the environment. My people, my species, don't care. They say she's weak. But I can't let her die. Please, I've hidden here, but they'll find us soon. They'll kill us both." Her voice broke, and she hugged her daughter tighter. Alex was silent for a moment, processing everything she had just said. His mind couldn't fully grasp the situation. An alien woman, begging for help, with a child on the brink of death. What was he supposed to do? Tara looked up at him, her expression desperate. "Please, you don't understand. They don't value compassion. They don't care about family. I'm nothing to them, but to you. You could be our savior. Please, help us." The urgency in her voice hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He had no idea what he was getting into, but something inside him, the human side of him, knew he couldn't leave them. Not like this. Not when they were so close to death. Tara reached out toward him, her fingers trembling. "I will do anything. I'll give you anything. Just, please help us." Alex's heart beat faster as he stared at her horn. His mind screamed at him to stay away, to protect himself, to focus on his mission. But in his chest, something else stirred, a deep primal need to protect them, to fight for their survival. His instincts told him to move on, to forget about these two strangers, these aliens. But his humanity, the part of him that still remembered the value of life, overpowered everything else. He stepped forward and knelt beside them. "All right," he said quietly. "I'll help you, but we have to move fast. They'll be looking for you." Tara's face lit up with a spark of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, as if Alex had just given her everything she had ever wanted. "I knew you'd help. You're different from my people. You're good." Alex didn't know what he had just gotten into, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just a rescue mission anymore. This was something much bigger. And for the first time since the crash, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he had a purpose again. Alex could feel his heart racing as he knelt beside Tara and her sick daughter Zora. His instincts screamed at him to be cautious, to keep his distance from these aliens, but something about their situation felt different. The desperation in Tara's voice and the fragile, weak form of Zara made him pause. They were both survivors, just like him. They were in this mess together. Tara looked at him, with hope shining in her eyes. But there was also an undercurrent of fear. She was out of options. And now, the fate of her child rested in Alex's hands. Alex wasn't a medic. He was a soldier, trained for combat and survival, not saving lives. But seeing Zora's pale face, her shallow breaths, made something stir inside him. He knew that if he didn't help them, they would die. And something told him that leaving them to die wasn't an option. The cave they were hiding in was cold, damp, and dark, but Tara had made it her home. She had gathered some basic supplies, but it was clear they were running low on food and medical resources. The small fire in the corner flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Zara lay motionless, her small form trembling as Tara gently stroked her hair. Alex could see the worry etched on Tara's face, and it only made his resolve stronger. He couldn't walk away from this. Tara looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and desperation. "You said you'd help us," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You're a human, right? You can save her. I know you can." Alex's heart sank as he looked at Zora's fragile body. Her skin was a sickly greenish hue, and she was barely breathing. The alien environment was toxic to her, her body unable to cope with the planet's atmosphere. The aliens, Tara's people, didn't care about the weak. They saw survival of the fittest as the only law. Tara had been cast aside because of her compassion, and now her daughter was paying the price for it. "I'll do what I can," Alex said, trying to keep his voice steady. But deep down, he knew he wasn't equipped for this. He wasn't a doctor, and he had no idea how to treat an alien illness. He couldn't let them down, though. He had already made a promise. Tara's face softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know what I would have done without you. Alex nodded, but his mind was already working on a plan. He needed to find supplies, something that could help. His eyes scanned the cave, but there was nothing here that could help Zara. He'd have to go out and search for something, anything that might be useful. I'll go out and look for more supplies, Alex said. You stay here with Zora. Keep her warm. I'll be back as soon as I can. Tara nodded, her hands trembling as she cradled Zora close. Please hurry. I don't know how much longer she has. Alex turned and stepped out of the cave, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the alien planet. The air was thick, oppressive, and the ground beneath his boots felt unstable. It was as if the planet itself was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. He needed to find something, anything, that could help Zara. But with the alien forces hunting them, every step he took had to be calculated. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. The rocky terrain stretched out before him, barren and lifeless, but he knew there had to be something in this hostile environment that could provide the cure Zora needed. As he moved, the sound of distant drones hummed in the air, and Alex instinctively ducked behind a rock. The alien forces were still out there, searching for them. He had to be careful. If they spotted him, it would be over for all of them. Hours passed as Alex searched the barren landscape for anything that might help. His body ached, his muscles burning from the constant movement, but he couldn't afford to rest. Every minute counted. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie orange glow over the alien horizon. The wind howled, carrying with it the faint scent of something strange, something he couldn't quite place. Just when he was about to give up, he spotted a small cluster of plants growing near the edge of a cliff. They were unlike anything he had ever seen before, bright, almost glowing, with strange markings on their leaves. He approached them cautiously, wondering if these plants could be used for medicinal purposes. His military training told him to be careful. He didn't know what kind of dangers the planet's flora might pose. Alex carefully plucked a few of the plants, examining them closely. They didn't seem toxic, but he needed to get them back to Tara to see if they could help. With the plants in hand, he made his way back to the cave as quickly as he could, but the journey back felt longer than it should have. The sun had nearly set, and the night was coming quickly. When he returned to the cave, Tara looked up at him with a mixture of hope and relief. "Did you find something?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex nodded, holding up the strange plants. "These might work," he said, trying to sound confident. He didn't know if they would work, but he had to try. "I'll make a tincture or something. We'll see if it helps." Tara took the plants from him, her eyes scanning them with a mix of curiosity and desperation. She didn't question him. She just nodded, trusting him. "Please, do anything you can." As Alex worked to prepare the plants, he couldn't help but feel a sense of bond growing between them. He was no longer just a soldier helping strangers. He was part of something bigger. He was part of this fragile, makeshift family. Tara and Zara had no one left, and now Alex was their protector. They were unlikely allies in a world that seemed to offer no hope, but together, they might just survive. The night was long, filled with tense silence and the occasional sound of distant alien drones passing overhead. Alex's mind raced as he worked, but he knew that no matter what happened, he couldn't leave them. They were his responsibility now, and he was determined to do whatever it took to save them. Alex sat by the flickering fire, staring at the strange plants he had gathered. Tara was carefully brewing the mixture, trying to create something that could save her daughter. Zara's condition hadn't improved, and her breath was still shallow, the steady rise and fall of her chest more fragile with every passing moment. Time was running out, and Alex knew it. He was doing everything he could, but a sinking feeling in his gut told him that even if the plants worked, it might not be enough. As Tara carefully prepared the herbs, Alex's mind raced. The alien forces would eventually track them down. His ship was destroyed, and he couldn't call for backup. The longer they stayed on this planet, the more likely it was that they would be found. It wasn't just Zora's life that was at risk anymore. Tara's life was in danger as well. Alex had no illusions. The alien people who had abandoned Tara wouldn't hesitate to kill her. They saw compassion and weakness as a threat, and if they found out that a human was helping her, they'd kill him too. Alex was a soldier, trained to think strategically, and the strategy was simple: survival. His priority should be his own life, his own mission. Everything else was secondary. But the more Alex thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't just walk away. The moral dilemma ate at him. Tara had trusted him. She had pleaded for his help, and despite everything, Alex had agreed. Now, here they were, in a cave on a hostile alien planet, with Zora clinging to life and Tara depending on him for survival. Could he really leave them? Was his own safety more important than their lives? The decision weighed heavily on him. It was clear that if they stayed on this planet, they would be caught. The alien forces would find them, and Alex knew they wouldn't take prisoners. But if they left, where would they go? How could they escape a planet that was hostile in every way, both physically and politically? "I don't know if this will work," Tara said quietly, breaking the silence. She was still working on the potion, but her voice held a note of defeat. "I've tried everything, but nothing has worked. I don't know how much longer I can keep her alive." Alex looked at her, his eyes filled with sympathy. He could see the exhaustion in her face, the lines of worry and fear that had settled there. He knew that she wasn't just afraid for Zora's life. She was afraid for her own. She had been cast out by her people, abandoned to die alone with her daughter. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was about proving to herself that she could protect her child, even in a universe that seemed so determined to destroy them. "You've done everything you can," Alex said, trying to offer her some comfort. "We'll figure this out. I won't let anything happen to you." Tara's eyes flickered with something, a mixture of gratitude and doubt. "But why are you helping us?" she asked. "You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me. You could have just walked away." Alex hesitated. Why was he helping her? Why had he stayed when every part of him told him to leave, to protect himself and his mission? He could feel the pull of duty, the human duty to help, to protect, to care for others. It was ingrained in him, part of what made him who he was. But that didn't answer Tara's question. Why him? Why now? "I guess I just can't turn my back on you," Alex said, his voice quiet. "You're not alone anymore. I'm not going to leave you." Tara studied him for a long moment, as if trying to figure him out. "You're a good man," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "But I know you're also a soldier. You know how dangerous it is to be on this planet. Why stay? Why risk your life for me? For Zora?" Alex took a deep breath, knowing that he couldn't just ignore the elephant in the room. The truth was, staying here was dangerous, and there was a chance they wouldn't survive if they didn't leave soon. His military training had always been clear: do the job, survive the mission, and get out. Everything else was secondary. Yet, as he looked at Tara's face, he realized that this wasn't just a mission. This was about something much more important. "I don't know what the right choice is," Alex admitted, "but I can't leave you here to die. I've seen enough death in my life to last a lifetime. I can't be part of that. I can't just turn away when someone needs help. I couldn't live with myself." Tara's expression softened, and for the first time since Alex had met her, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it held a deep, quiet strength. "Thank you," she said simply. But Alex could see that there was more to it. He could see the conflict in her eyes. She was grateful, yes, but she also knew the risks. She had been abandoned by her own people, and now she was depending on a human soldier to help her. He was their only hope, and that burden weighed heavily on her. But at that moment, Alex realized that she, too, was grappling with her own moral dilemma. She couldn't afford to trust anyone. Yet here she was, trusting him. As Alex sat beside her, lost in thought, a low rumble echoed through the cave. His head snapped up. The sound was faint, but it was unmistakable. The drones. The alien forces had found them. Tara's eyes widened in fear. "They're here," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Alex stood, his hand tightening on his rifle. He looked back at Tara and Zora. There was no time to waste. He had a decision to make, and the clock was ticking. "We can't stay here," Alex said, his voice firm. "We need to move. Now." But Tara hesitated, her hand still on Zora. "But she's not strong enough. If we leave, we might lose her." Alex clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the decision press on him. His mind raced, weighing the options: stay and risk capture, or leave and risk Zora's life. It was a choice he couldn't make easily, but he knew one thing for sure: whatever happened, he couldn't abandon them now. His heart told him that the right thing to do was to fight, to give them a chance. "We'll take her with us," Alex said, his voice resolute. "We're not leaving her behind. We'll find a way to survive." Tara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. With the sound of distant engines growing louder, Alex knew that the time to act had come. There was no turning back now. The moral dilemma wasn't about choosing between survival or sacrifice anymore. It was about doing what was right, no matter the cost. And for Alex, that meant protecting these two lives, even if it meant risking his own. The night air was thick with tension as Alex helped Tara prepare to leave the cave. The distant hum of the alien drones grew louder, and with every passing second, they knew the enemy was closing in. Tara's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, but there was something else too, something deep in her expression. It was a mixture of desperation and determination. She knew this was their only chance. There was no going back. Zora, though still weak, had managed to stir. Her small, pale body trembled as Tara gently picked her up. The girl's face was pale, but her eyes, those bright, alien eyes, were filled with confusion and fear. She had been so sick for so long, and now she was being asked to run, to survive in a world that had already tried to kill her. It was hard for Alex to imagine what it must feel like for a child to be caught in a struggle for survival like this, but he could see the bond between mother and daughter. It was unbreakable, a love so strong that it transcended all else. Even in a world that wanted to destroy them, Tara and Zora had each other. Alex adjusted the strap of his rifle and turned to Tara. "We need to move quickly. If they spot us, we're done for. Stay close to me, and don't make a sound." Tara nodded, clutching Zora tightly to her chest. "I won't let anything happen to her. I promise," she said, her voice full of resolve. Alex wasn't sure if he believed her, but he understood. Tara was doing what any mother would do, fighting to protect her child. In that moment, he realized how much of a family bond they truly shared. They may not have been related by blood, but their bond was just as strong. They had found each other in the chaos of war, and now their fates were intertwined. They slipped out of the cave, careful not to make any noise. Alex led the way, his senses on high alert. The planet was hostile, and the alien forces were everywhere. The wind howled through the desolate landscape, carrying with it the scent of danger. The rocky terrain stretched out before them, an endless expanse of harsh, unforgiving land. Every shadow felt like a threat, and every creaking branch sounded like the footsteps of an enemy. But they had no choice. Moving forward was the only option. They walked for what felt like hours, the darkness of the alien night pressing in around them. Alex's mind raced as he planned their next move. He had no idea where they could go. The alien forces had control of most of the planet. The cities were crawling with their kind, and the wilderness was filled with dangers that no one had survived. Their best bet was to find shelter, someplace hidden and secure. But even that felt like a long shot. The planet seemed designed to make survival impossible. As they walked, Alex couldn't help but think about how much had changed since he first encountered Tara and Zora. When he had first found them, he had seen them as strangers, aliens in need of help. But now he couldn't ignore the bond they had formed. They were no longer just strangers. They were his responsibility. They were his family. It was strange to think about, especially when he had been so focused on his mission before all this started. But the truth was, Terra and Zara had become something more to him. They had become part of his life, and he couldn't imagine leaving them behind. The bond between mother and daughter was so strong that Alex could almost feel it. Every time Zara cried out in pain, Terra's face twisted in agony. She would do anything to ease her daughter's suffering, and Alex could see the toll it was taking on her. The longer they were on this planet, the more it seemed like survival was slipping away from them. But there was something else too. Despite all the fear and the uncertainty, Terra refused to give up. Every step she took, she did so with the unwavering strength of a mother determined to protect her child. Zara, though weak and fragile, also showed a strength that Alex hadn't expected. She clung to her mother, even in her weakened state, and despite her illness, there was something fierce in her eyes. She wasn't ready to give up. She was fighting, just like her mother. They came across a small patch of rocky outcrop that provided some cover from the wind and the drones overhead. Alex signaled for them to stop, his mind working quickly. "We need to stay here for a while," he said. "We'll rest, but not for long. I don't want to risk staying in one place too long." Terra nodded, but her eyes were tired. She gently set Zara down, her hands trembling as she laid her daughter against the cold rock. Zara let out a small moan, but her mother's soft murmurs seemed to calm her. Alex watched the two of them, feeling a strange mix of admiration and guilt. He didn't know how much longer they could survive like this. The planet was against them, the alien forces were hunting them, and there was only so much Alex could do. But there was one thing he knew for certain: he couldn't leave them. They were no longer just strangers to him. Terra and Zara had become his family, and he would fight to protect them. His training, his mission, it all felt distant now. In this moment, there was only the two of them. They needed him, and he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Terra looked up at him, her eyes full of silent gratitude. She didn't say anything, but there was a connection between them that spoke louder than words. She knew that Alex was risking everything to help them. She had no idea what he was going through, but she understood the sacrifice he was making. He was a soldier, not just fighting for his own survival, but fighting for them. She would never forget that. The wind howled again, but it was a different sound now. There was a moment of calm, a brief lull in the storm. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alex knew they couldn't stay here forever. The drones would be back soon, and they needed to keep moving. But for that brief moment, as they huddled together on the rocky outcrop, Alex allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The bond between Terra and Zara, the love and determination that filled them both, gave him a reason to fight. And even though the odds were against them, he knew he couldn't let them down. He was part of their family now, and he would fight with everything he had to protect them. As they packed up and prepared to move once more, Alex couldn't help but think about how far they had come. From the moment he had met them in the cave to now, they had become something more than allies. They had become family. And in the harshest of worlds, in the face of overwhelming odds, that bond would be the one thing that kept them going. The planet might have been determined to kill them. The alien forces might have been hunting them. But Alex knew one thing for sure: as long as they had each other, they would survive. They were a family, and nothing, not even the darkest corners of the universe, could break that bond. The sky above them was a deep shade of purple, with stars twinkling faintly in the distance. But beneath that peaceful exterior, danger was closing in. The wind howled through the rocky landscape, a harsh reminder that they weren't safe. Not yet. Terra, Alex, and Zara had been on the run for what felt like days, dodging alien drones and trekking through hostile terrain. They were exhausted, their energy drained from the constant struggle to survive. But there was no time to rest now. The final confrontation was inevitable, and Alex knew they had no choice but to face it head-on. The distant hum of the alien machines grew louder, a sound that sent shivers down Alex's spine. The alien forces had found them. There was no mistaking it. They had tracked them down, and this time, there would be no escape. Tara, clutching Zara to her chest, looked up at Alex with fear in her eyes. But there was something else there, too, something more powerful. It was the same determination he had seen in her since the beginning, the unshakable drive to protect her daughter at all costs. "We can't outrun them anymore," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. He glanced around, trying to find any advantage in the terrain, any possible escape route. But there was nothing. The cliffs were too high, the ground too uneven. They were trapped. "We have to fight." Tara nodded, her grip on Zara tightening. "What's the plan?" As they walked, Alex couldn't help but think about how much had changed since he first encountered Tara and Zara. When he had first found them, he had seen them as strangers, aliens in need of help. But now he couldn't ignore the bond they had formed. They were no longer just strangers. They were his responsibility. They were his family. It was strange to think about, especially when he had been so focused on his mission before all this started. But the truth was, Tara and Zara had become something more to him. They had become part of his life, and he couldn't imagine leaving them behind. The bond between mother and daughter was so strong that Alex could almost feel it. Every time Zara cried out in pain, Tara's face twisted in agony. She would do anything to ease her daughter's suffering, and Alex could see the toll it was taking on her. The longer they were on this planet, the more it seemed like survival was slipping away from them. But there was something else, too. Despite all the fear and the uncertainty, Tara refused to give up. Every step she took, she did so with the unwavering strength of a mother determined to protect her child. Zara, though weak and fragile, also showed a strength that Alex hadn't expected. She clung to her mother, even in her weakened state, and despite her illness, there was something fierce in her eyes. She wasn't ready to give up. She was fighting, just like her mother. They came across a small patch of rocky outcrop that provided some cover from the wind and the drones overhead. Alex signaled for them to stop, his mind working quickly. "We need to stay here for a while," he said. "We'll rest, but not for long. I don't want to risk staying in one place too long." Tara nodded, but her eyes were tired. She gently set Zara down, her hands trembling as she laid her daughter against the cold rock. Zara let out a small moan, but her mother's soft murmurs seemed to calm her. Alex watched the two of them, feeling a strange mix of admiration and guilt. He didn't know how much longer they could survive like this. The planet was against them. The alien forces were hunting them. And there was only so much Alex could do. But there was one thing he knew for certain. He couldn't leave them. They were no longer just strangers to him. Tara and Zara had become his family, and he would fight to protect them. His training, his mission. It all felt distant now. In this moment, there was only the two of them. They needed him, and he would do whatever it took to keep them safe. Tara looked up at him, her eyes full of silent gratitude. She didn't say anything, but there was a connection between them that spoke louder than words. She knew that Alex was risking everything to help them. She had no idea what he was going through, but she understood the sacrifice he was making. He was a soldier, not just fighting for his own survival, but fighting for them. She would never forget that. The wind howled again, but it was a different sound now. There was a moment of calm, a brief lull in the storm. It was as if the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The tension in the air was palpable, and Alex knew they couldn't stay here forever. The drones would be back soon, and they needed to keep moving. But for that brief moment, as they huddled together on the rocky outcrop, Alex allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The bond between Tara and Zara. The love and determination that filled them both. gave him a reason to fight. And even though the odds were against them, he knew he couldn't let them down. He was part of their family now, and he would fight with everything he had to protect them. As they packed up and prepared to move once more, Alex couldn't help but think about how far they had come. From the moment he had met them in the cave to now, they had become something more than allies. They had become family. And in the harshest of worlds, in the face of overwhelming odds, that bond would be the one thing that kept them going. The planet might have been determined to kill them. The alien forces might have been hunting them. But Alex knew one thing for sure. As long as they had each other, they would survive. They were a family. And nothing, not even the darkest corners of the universe, could break that bond. The sky above them was a deep shade of purple, with stars twinkling faintly in the distance. But beneath that peaceful exterior, danger was closing in. The wind howled through the rocky landscape, a harsh reminder that they weren't safe. Not yet. Tara, Alex, and Zara had been on the run for what felt like days, dodging alien drones and trekking through hostile terrain. They were exhausted, their energy drained from the constant struggle to survive. But there was no time to rest now. The final confrontation was inevitable, and Alex knew they had no choice but to face it head-on. The distant hum of the alien machines grew louder, a sound that sent shivers down Alex's spine. The alien forces had found them. There was no mistaking it. They had tracked them down, and this time there would be no escape. Tara, clutching Zara to her chest, looked up at Alex with fear in her eyes. But there was something else there, too, something more powerful. It was the same determination he had seen in her since the beginning, the unshakable drive to protect her daughter at all costs. "We can't outrun them anymore," Alex said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. He glanced around, trying to find any advantage in the terrain, any possible escape route. But there was nothing. The cliffs were too high, the ground too uneven. They were trapped. "We have to fight." Tara nodded, her grip on Zara tightening. "What's the plan?" Alex looked at her, then at Zara. He had grown close to them in a way he hadn't expected. They had become more than just a mother and child in need of help. They had become his family, and he would do anything to protect them. He couldn't let them die here. He wouldn't. "There's a ridge just ahead," Alex said, pointing to a high point in the distance. "We'll use it for cover. If we can get to it, we might be able to fight back. But we need to move quickly. The drones are closing in fast." They started moving toward the ridge, their footsteps quick but cautious. Every so often, Alex would glance over his shoulder, watching the growing swarm of alien machines behind them. He knew they couldn't outrun them, not with Zara in such a weakened state. His heart raced, but he didn't let fear take hold. This was it, the moment that would decide their fate. As they reached the ridge, Alex signaled for them to stop. He crouched behind a rock, peering out cautiously to see what they were up against. The alien drones hovered in the air, their sleek metal bodies glistening in the moonlight. They were like predators, moving in a coordinated pattern, scanning the area for any signs of life. The drones were not just machines. They were alive in their own way, ruthless and relentless. They were the perfect hunters. Tara's breath caught as she saw the drones, their glowing red eyes searching the landscape. She pulled Zara close, hiding them both behind the rock. Alex motioned for her to stay low. They couldn't afford to be seen now. Every move they made needed to be calculated. If they were spotted, they would be overwhelmed in seconds. The tension in the air was thick. Alex could feel his pulse racing as he prepared for the worst. The drones were getting closer, their sensors sweeping the area with a chilling precision. They had to act fast. He glanced at Tara, her face a mask of determination, and at Zara, who was shivering in her mother's arms. He didn't know how much longer she could hold on, but he wasn't going to let her die here. Not like this. "We need to take them out, one by one," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "I'll create a distraction, and you two take cover. When I give the signal, You move. We'll stick to the plan." Tara nodded, her eyes locked on his. "Be careful," she whispered. Alex didn't reply. There was no time for words. He rose from his crouch and dashed forward, moving swiftly and silently. He needed to draw the drone's attention away from Tara and Zora. As he ran, he activated the cloaking device strapped to his waist. The faint hum of the device filled his ears as his body vanished from sight. It wasn't perfect. He could still be seen in certain conditions, but it would have to do. He sprinted toward a group of nearby rocks, the drones following the faint traces of his movement. Once he reached the rocks, he fired a single shot into the air, causing a loud explosion that echoed across the landscape. The drones immediately shifted their focus toward the noise, their red eyes scanning the area, searching for the source. The distraction worked. For a moment, the drones were no longer focused on Tara and Zora. He signaled for them to move. Tara, with Zora still in her arms, began to crawl toward the next rock formation. Alex kept his eyes on the drones, making sure none of them noticed their movement. His heart pounded in his chest. This was their chance. They had to make it to the next position before the drones realized what was happening. But just as they began to move, one of the drones turned and spotted them. The red light flashed, and the machine's weapon systems engaged. Alex didn't hesitate. He charged at the drone, his rifle raised. He fired several shots, hitting the drone's weak spot. It exploded in a fiery burst, but more drones were closing in. They needed more time. "Keep moving," Alex shouted, his voice strained as he continued to fight off the drones. Tara and Zora were almost to the next ridge. They had to make it. But the drones weren't giving up. They were relentless. One by one, Alex took them out, using every bit of his training to disable them. But he knew that if they kept coming at this rate, they wouldn't last much longer. Finally, as the last of the drones fell to the ground, Alex collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. He had done it. They had won. For now. Tara and Zora ran toward him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Is it over?" Tara asked, her voice shaking. Alex nodded, his eyes scanning the area to make sure no other drones were nearby. "It's over for now, but we have to keep moving." As they made their way to safety, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had made it through the worst of it. They had faced down the alien forces and come out on top. But more than that, they had done it together. They had survived because they had each other. That was what made them strong. They were a family, and nothing would ever break that bond. The road ahead was still uncertain, but Alex knew one thing for sure. They would fight for each other, no matter what came next.